Hello, interesting people. Today we'll be looking at 5 wild things that I found floating around the internet. A NASA gadget that was built to grip onto rocks in space, an elephant who may or may not have a soft spot for humans, a train that gets swallowed by the sea, a machine that strips shellfish off a metal pole like it's peeling a banana, and a tiny fake city that's built just for kids so they can learn how to survive in real traffic. And before we get any further, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button as it genuinely helps my channel to grow. Alright, let's start off in space, or more accurately, a machine that's gonna help us with future space exploration. NASA's been quietly working on a piece of hardware that almost looks too simple to be impressive until you realize what it's actually meant to do. They've called it a microspine anchor, and its job is to grip onto rocks. And the type of rocks that it's designed to grip onto are those unpredictable, non-perfect rocks. We're talking about those hard to grip, jaggedy, unpredictable rocks that you might find on an asteroid or on a cliff face on Mars. And the problem that NASA is trying to solve is that in space or in low gravity objects like a comet, there's almost nothing to hold a robot down. No real gravity means the robot's gonna have a hard time gripping onto things. Wheeled robots are great for flat planes, but the second you put it on a cliff or on the wall of a lava tube, these wheels are useless. So you would need something that you can grab and hold onto rocks like tiny fingers digging into stone. And that's exactly what these microspine anchors do. You can picture a rock climber that's trying to climb a rock face, and instead of having just a few fingers, it has dozens or even hundreds of little hooks that grip into the rocks. And they all independently flex to find tiny cracks or bumps on the rock surface. Individually, each spine is pretty weak, but when you combine them together, it creates a surprisingly strong grip. And NASA just didn't guess at how strong they would need it, they actually measured it. And these prototypes were tested by pulling in every single direction that it could be on a rock face. Pulling sideways along the rock surface, the anchors held at around 160 newtons of force. And pulling at a 45-degree angle, they held at around 150 newtons. And pulling straight out directly from the rock surface, which is normally the hardest to resist, they actually held at around 180 newtons of force, which is really impressive. And for a device with no motors, no suction, just tiny metal hooks, that's an impressive amount of holding power. And you could think of this as a robotic mountain goat that's designed to eventually scale the wall of a crater or the inside of a lava tube. The robot gripping onto rock is only half of the story here. The same project also showed something else off, a drill, specifically a rotary percussive drill, which means it spins as well as hammering. So it's more like a screwdriver and a jackhammer in one. And the most interesting part is that it's designed to work no matter which way gravity's pulling them. They've already used this to drill upside down, fighting gravity directly into a rock face. And it worked. They were able to drill 20 millimeters wide and 83 millimeters deep into a chunk of rock. And it was a type of volcanic rock with tiny gas bubbles similar to what you'd find on Mars or the moon. Although this one robot might not sound very revolutionary, it is laying the literal groundwork for how humanity might one day explore comets, asteroids, and the hidden tunnels of Mars. Next, we're going to talk about elephants. And this one's been making the round for years. This video's of a young elephant charging in the water seemingly to save a human who looks like they're struggling against the current. If you look at the comment sections for these videos online, you'll see people explaining that elephants think that humans are cute. You know, kind of like how we think puppies and kittens are cute. It's a nice idea, but as far as anybody can verify, it still remains unproven. And this claim actually has a root back onto, of course, the internet. Back in 2017, a college student posted online claiming that elephants apparently see humans the way that we see puppies. And they claimed that the same part of the brain lights up in both cases. And the post really did explode, with tens of thousands of shares within days. And the person who wrote it admitted very openly that she was not a scientist, and that the claim came from a quick internet search. To her credit, she was very upfront about it, although her feel-good post did go way beyond what she expected. So does that mean that elephants don't actually care about us? Not exactly. There is real documented history here, although there's no actual brain scans. Now, elephants have been tamed to work alongside humans for thousands of years, and researchers have noticed that these relationships are strange compared compared to most domesticated animals. Most animals that we consider fully domesticated, like dogs and cats, descend from ancestors that were selectively bred over generations. And this is why elephants are different. A wild-caught elephant can form intense affectional bonds with a human, and without generations of selective breeding being involved. And yet there are elephants in captivity that remained wild and dangerous their whole lives. And it's very inconsistent, which makes it very interesting. We can see that they seem to value certain human relationships, but elephants still remain unpredictable even towards people they know really well. Elephants have been documented to do surprising and seemingly compassionate things. But do elephants really think that humans are cute like puppies? Well, unfortunately, that part is not backed by real science. But a post will go more viral if you can put that in the title, so of course people do. Alright, and moving on to the next story, this one might mess with your brain a little. And this video here is of a rail line, a real functioning railway that connects mainland northern Germany to a cluster of tiny islands in the North Sea, called the Halligen. And these islands are so low and exposed that during storm surges, they can actually flood almost entirely. And residents built their homes on raised mounds, so they had specifically survived situations like this, with the water raising around them. It's gotta be one of the most unusual places to live in all of Europe. And this is considered a narrow gauge railway, which means that the tracks are much closer together than a standard train, with only 600 millimeters apart, which is less than 2 feet. And it was built back in 1933 and 34, with the original purpose not being tourism or convenience. It was actually coastal defense. The line was specifically built to support workers maintaining and protecting embankments that keep the sea from swallowing these low-lying islands. At high tide, a huge amount of the landscape is completely submerged, and at low tide, it's completely exposed as far as you can see. And the rail line runs through that zone, which means the tracks themselves spend a part of every day completely submerged. To survive that, the rails are made out of a high manganese steel, a type of steel that was chosen specifically because it resists the corrosive effects of salt water far better than a standard steel would. Because if you didn't know, salt water is brutal on metal, and the salt water just doesn't rust metal, it seemingly eats through it over time. So choosing the right material just isn't a small detail, it's the reason why the railway has survived for nearly a century. So is this some sort of elaborate tourist attraction? Well, no, although it might seem like one, it's actually not. And the line is not open to the public. It's specifically used by the residents and their guests, as well as coastal workers who maintain the sea defenses. I can see why videos like this go viral when they're posted, because there's something almost liminal about a random track that's in the sea. And with how vast the open water is in the video here, it's pretty interesting. And next we're going to be looking into this interesting looking mussel harvesting machine. And in this setup here, you can see a method of shellfish farming that uses long metal poles driven into shallow coastal waters. At high tide, these poles are fully submerged, and mussel larvae, while drifting through the water, will attach themselves to these poles and start growing. Over time, layers of mussels will build up onto the entire lengths of these poles, and essentially turning them into a living column of shellfish. And during low tide, when these poles are exposed and accessible, harvesting machines like the one in this video roll in. A metal arm reaches out, grabs a hold onto the pole, and uses a custom cutting and scraping mechanism to shear the mussels clearly off the surface. Then the machine drops the collected shellfish onto a nearby boat, ready to be sorted, cleaned, and then shipped off to market. Now, you can harvest mussels the traditional way by collecting them off the seafloor, although growing them this way is cleaner with fewer predators like crabs being able to reach them. And therefore the shellfish generally come out with a more consistent size and quality. And from what I could find, it seems to take around 12 to 18 months before they're ready to harvest. Mussels are farmed and consumed on a massive scale worldwide, with millions of tons harvested globally every year, which makes this one of the most efficient seafood farming methods on the planet, since the mussels essentially raise themselves once on the poles, with no feeding required. And what's most interesting is that these machines do in seconds what would take a regular person hours of scraping to accomplish. And finally, here's the last subject we'll be talking about in this video. Have you ever seen or did you get to participate in one of these little mini cities, a scaled down replica complete with tiny roads, sidewalks, crosswalks, and traffic signals? And these are built specifically so kids can practice being safe pedestrians, cyclists, and eventually drivers. These miniature training cities go by a few different names depending on where you are in the world, and they're sometimes called traffic gardens, safety towns, or safety villages. And the concept for these have existed in various forms for decades in countries like Germany, Japan, Canada, and the United States. The whole idea here is to take something that's genuinely dangerous, like real traffic, and to shrink it down into a low-stakes environment where kids can make mistakes safely and then learn from them. Inside these cities, kids will learn the fundamentals of looking both ways before crossing and understanding what red, yellow, and green lights actually mean. And they'll get to do things like learning to ride a bike safely near a street, learning the shape and meaning of stop and yield signs, and understanding the right of way in intersections. And some of these facilities will scale things down to kid-sized proportions, with tiny buildings and miniature road signs, while others will close off certain sections so that kids can get comfortable with the environment that matches what they'll actually experience when they're out in the real world. And the reasoning behind these programs is backed by something pretty simple. Young children genuinely struggle to judge the speed and distance of an approaching car in a way that adults take for granted, and they're more easily distracted and less predictable near roads than adults are. And rather than trying to explain these subjects to them, these mini cities let kids build the instincts through repetition. And it's an interesting idea because it teaches kids safety and life-saving habits through play, which is a great way of doing it in my opinion. And I actually have some fond memories of participating in one of these when I was a kid. Alright, that's gonna be it for this video. Make sure you like and subscribe and leave a comment on what you found most interesting. And also let me know if you got to participate in one of these little mini cities too. Also next, make sure to check out this interesting video. Until next time, I'm Chinetri and bye for now.